live. It says we're live, but are we? Wait for it. Play. Okay. Seems to be working. I see 8 people watching. Okay, I'm gonna mute that so I'm not hearing myself twice. Okay, hello Linda, hello Bo, we have people, hooray. Excellent. All right, well, and Rolf, thanks for coming. Okay, let's go ahead and get this party started. Thank you, Alec. All right, so hello everyone that is here and everyone that will be coming soon. If you don't know, my name is Caitlin Bucksbaum, and I'm the owner of Red Sweater Press, a micro-publishing company based in Alaska. So we're here to celebrate our latest publication, Oblivescence, with author Kelly R. Samuels. So Kelly is the author of not only Oblivescence, but also the full-length collection All the Time in the World, and 4 chapbooks, Talking to Alice, to Marie Antoinette from, Words Some of Us Rarely Use, and Xena Zenobia Speaks. She is a Pushcart Prize and Best of the Net nominee, with poetry appearing in the Massachusetts Review, Court Green, and Rhino, and prose at McSweeney's Internet Tendency, Cleaver, and 5 on the 5th. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Caitlin.
And if you haven't already read, people who are listening, Oblivescence is a book of poetry carried by a daughter's relationship with her mother as they navigate the latter's struggle with dementia due to Alzheimer's, a condition that approximately 6.7 million Americans are battling now. This book of memory and loss is rich in imagery as well as metaphor and threaded with allusions to Greek mythology, clinical psychology, and gardening. Readers of all kinds, but especially caregivers, mothers, daughters, and medical staff, are sure to be moved by this written exploration of what it means to remember. And I'm going to check our people, make sure that's still working. Hooray. Wonderful. Check those off. All right, before we jump into the reading and discussion, for everybody here, I want to explain part 1 of the raffle. There are 3 parts. And our first part is for a free signed copy of Oblivescence. So all you have to do is type in "pick me" in the chat on YouTube. Or if you are not logged into YouTube but you are watching, then you can send me an email at kate@redsweaterpress.com. So all you got to do is say "pick me" and you will be entered to win a copy of Oblivescence signed by Kelly. Let's see here. Okay, that's good. Okay, so to kick things off, Kelly, could you tell us about the cover of Oblivescence and the interior illustrations? Those of you who've been following us online on social media have maybe seen some of those. So how did those things come to be, and what's the significance of those images for you?
First, I want to thank you for hosting. I am very happy to be here. I want to thank the people who have shown up. I am grateful to them for reading my work. I do want to apologize ahead of time in case I seem a little spacey and out of it. I did, after 4 years and all those booster shots, finally get COVID a week ago. So I have been sick with that, but I am very happy to be here. So the cover, the beautiful cover, was designed by my daughter, Kate Netwall, who is a very talented artist. She did the artwork for my first chapbook, Words Some of Us Rarely Use. And so when this looked like, yeah, it's going to be a manuscript, I asked her to do some mock-ups. And she did some, and then we started talking about including a picture. And really it was just, for both of us, it was going to be this picture of my mom as a very small girl in my great-grandmother's tulip bed in her hometown. So that's how that came to be. The interior illustrations were actually your idea, Caitlin. You suggested that Kate come up with some ideas for the section breaks. and Kate came back with 4 items that my mom always had on her that she always wore. Her watch, which Kate now wears,
Oh.
her earrings, which I now wear, her eyeglasses, and a black stone ring that she always had. So those, as I said, break up the sections and sort of, I think, offer just really nice companion to the poems, particularly there's a poem, Tending the Body, that I reference some of her items, and then also incidentals. So that's how they
Yeah,
came.
I had completely forgotten about the section break thing. That seems so long ago already, but I'm really glad, like very awesome to have your daughter in on this project,
Yes.
um, and have
Yeah.
her design experience work into this book. It's just a great book. Everyone should buy it. Um, but let's go ahead and read some poems because that's probably what you guys are here for. So yeah, Kelly, take it away.
I'm going to be reading 9 total poems tonight from the collection, 3 from each section. And so the first one is Misspoke, which opens the first section. Um, this is a poem. One of the first things that I noticed that told me that something wasn't right with my mom was when she would misspeak. So she would incorrectly name an object. There were a few times when she incorrectly named me when she would be talking. And so when I was laying out the manuscript, trying to figure out, how do I want to structure this, I knew that Misspoke was going to come early in the collection, especially because I decided to follow the progression of the disease loosely. So Misspoke, as I said, opens the first section. It's on page 7. Misspoke. A ship, you say, is in the garden. A ship, a sheep, a swallow. Water, land, air. You speak without realizing you misspoke. And why not water? Nights of little sleep, the bed was a berth, the walls a hall, the lawn an ocean, the hill a swell. We stand by the back door so you can show me. It's old, with sails, and the white heather gives way on either side.
This is actually one of my favorite poems in the collection, and I think if I remember correctly, something that, you know, struck me right away. So like once I had your manuscript, I reading this poem and I'm like, okay, I want to keep reading this book.
Good.
um, but so I think you said that as far as the order of the poems in the book, that it's mostly following the progression of the of
Mhm.
Alzheimer's in
Yes.
your mom. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. And it wasn't like that. Initially, I actually thought that it might make more sense because sometimes Alzheimer's patients have days of lucidity where they seem perfectly fine. And so one of the earlier drafts, I sort of bebopped all over. But in the end, that felt a little too chaotic to me. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought probably it would be too chaotic for the readers. And so there was a ton of shuffling as there is, moving poems
Mm-hmm.
around, and landing on this. And then the creative nonfiction piece with the erasure poem was the last bit that I added to the manuscript. And I chose to put that in the center, roughly in the center, to give the reader a different experience, but also sort of to serve as a doorway into the later half of my mother's life and then passed into her death. So.
Yeah, I was hoping you would bring that up. People who have not seen the book yet, which is most of you, or maybe all of you, there's this, like she said, erasure poem, but you can still read the essay in there. So, what rises to the surface? This is also one of my favorite pieces in the book because it does something that I hadn't seen done before and like gives so much context to what's
Mhm,
happening. Like, it's great to have mystery in some poems, but this was so much more concrete and with the less concrete with the poem in it.
mhm.
I just thought it was a great placement, great work. I just have great things to say about you. So everything is great. All right. So I think shall we read another poem?
Yes. I'm going to read What Summer Was, which is on page 15. We're still in the first section. Um, this is one of several poems in the collection that doesn't focus entirely on my mother's disease. When I was writing, I thought it might be nice actually for the reader to know my mom in a way different from just her disease, give some backstory um, to her life and to mine, since I'm serving as the speaker. And so this particular poem references a few things. It references where I grew up, which was by a racetrack. Um, it references when we had lightning strike a power line coming into the house, and I actually was shocked. Um, this was probably when I was about 10 or 11. And then it also references a story my mom always told of a boy being struck by lightning on a baseball field in her hometown. What summer was. Cicadas and the racetrack meant summer, waiting for storms with attendant lightning. What you said struck down that boy on the baseball field on the outskirts of town, that town 4 blocks by 4, a church here, here, here. The heat lightning the other night was distant and irregular. I stood on the second floor landing to watch, recalled how I once thought the flash safer than the jagged, that blinding tuning fork. Nights of storm with either kind meant the races were canceled, and I slept sound, did not have to lie awake to their feverish revolution that seemed cousin to the cicadas in the trees, droning on, rising to a pitch. Summer was this, and this, washed out light, an itch for the storm's blast and clamor and spark. It traveled only once down the line, only made my ears ring, and you murmured, "Thanks be." That boy, bored with so few pop flies, clouds massing. Spectators claimed there'd be time. There was a crack and flare. The smell carried, something you never forgot.
Another excellent poem. I remember reading this one too for the first time, and it seems kind of, even though it's about lightning, which is something sudden, it seems kind of subtle as you're going on, and then in the end, it was so intense for me.
Mm,
I really enjoyed the journey of that poem.
thank you.
Um, and I remember we had talked about this little tiny dialogue in here, the thanks be.
Yeah,
And I think we decided we weren't entirely sure where that sort of saying came from, but you said she said that a lot.
she would say it. Yep. And so I remember having a conversation with you about I want to keep it that way, even if people are unfamiliar with it, because it was something I heard her say. We want to retain that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I still like the idea that it was a shortening of like thanks be to God, like some,
Yeah.
holdover from a religious thing. But either way, it's interesting and relevant and great. So good job. All right,
The
let's.
first poem from the first section I'll be reading is Recalling What Did Not Occur, which is on page 22. And this focuses or references at least false memories, something we sometimes hear about during court testimony, right? Someone claims that they saw it in a particular way, and then let's say there's video proof that proves that that wasn't the case. I took it a little bit farther and actually sort of focused on recalling what did not occur. So this specifically has to do with the Oktoberfest parade here in La Crosse, which we are famous for. Um, and I swear that at one time it went down a particular street here in La Crosse that there is no evidence that it actually did. And I have this memory of being there and watching it with my mom. And so this fit very well into the collection. Recalling what did not occur. What if I can remember what color the leaves were and how you said the one tree was showing off, flagrant in its alteration? We sat beneath it on the boulevard, west of the church, you in a folding chair, me on the curb. There was the snap of the seat put in place, a settling, a muddy sun, but no clouds portending rain. Before the first float appeared, you cracked a hard-boiled egg in your delicate hands and handed it to me whole, as if sustenance was necessary to enjoy what cavorted and pranced and played so near us, going north to cross where the marsh lay. Nowhere does it say that the parade ever took that route in all of its many years, nor that I ever served as its spectator again. And yet, how we stood after, shaking the blanket free of debris and stepping in to meet the corners, the distant beat of drums and wayward horn.
Another excellent poem, even if I'm biased. Something I noted is that this has a great turn where you say nowhere does it say that the parade ever took that route. Like I feel like it comes at a perfect spot in the poem, and it is a really interesting phenomenon. Especially at AWP, I went to this session on legal and ethical issues in memoir, and they talked about how memory it can be extremely subjective, but as long as you're telling your story and your experience of it, that's it's fine. But it's fascinating to see like how two people can remember something totally different,
Yep.
or imagine something happened that didn't happen at all.
Right.
um,
And how that, that may never have happened might carry just as much meaning in some way as what actually did. Right.
yeah, that's a good point. And with so much imagery in this poem, it's so easy to believe, like, yeah, that totally happened. I believe
Yeah.
you.
Yep.
You don't have to convince me. So it's a great story there as well as a great poem, I think.
Thank you.
All right, so we're gonna pause for a second to return to the raffle. So if you joined late, the first thing I mentioned is that we're raffling off a signed copy of Oblivescence, and you just write "pick me" in the chat. But we're also raffling off a copy of Kelly's first full-length collection, All the Time in the World, from Kelsey Books. So there it is. And how do you win that one? Well, this time you have to actually order a book to enter the raffle to win that one. So if you order Oblivescence sometime during the launch tonight, then you will be entered to win her other full-length collection, All the Time in the World. And we're going to announce all the winners at the end of the broadcast. And something I think I was going to mention at the end, but yeah, we'll get to that later. Okay, so raffling Oblivescence, raffling All the Time in the World for people who order the book today. And we can go ahead with some more poems. I typed in the chat, but just a reminder to people, if you have questions or comments about what we're talking about or what we're reading, feel free to put it in there, and we can either get to it at the end, or if it's relevant, then I'll bring it into our discussion as we're having it. So please use the chat. We love it when you chat. All right, let's read some more poems. What's next, Kelly?
So we're moving into the second section, and I'm again going to read the first poem, the title poem of the collection, Oblivescence. This was the first poem I wrote that found its way into the collection. And at that time, I didn't think it was going to be a collection. It was just a poem about my mom canning peaches and the memory of that. But as poems sometimes do, it grew and it became something more, and it became more about the process of forgetting. Oblivescence. This is the process, a series of actions or steps taken in order to something, natural or involuntary or systematic, the last like those Saturdays canning, what was first and then second, and so on. The enormous canner on the stovetop with its rumbling as you sorted and then peeled and then pitted the peaches, their ripe skins sheaths on the board, clinging to the knife's edge. The juice ran down your wrist, sticky and troublesome. You coated the slices in preserve before cramming them into the jars lined on the table, lined on the counter before covering them with the hot, sweet syrup and then immersing them. The timer made its harsh, diligent way while I asked of altitude and what part it played. You spoke of Colorado and the one time we were there and how your head felt as if it would break open, and then the precarious lifting and waiting, counting for the pop, the final ah. I would carry the jars down into the basement for you and stand them on the shelves, and much later remember them when reading that poem by the famous poet, and think of preparation and the wet jewel gold tongues kept. This, this task learned by you, not me, never me, now lost. Even in this telling, not all. Some semblance of narrative, but some necessary gestures absent, wiped away. The rattle of lids and rings and their tightening, for example. Or even how I made my way through that bounty.
I feel like I just need to clap at the end of every reading. It's so great. Um, so you sort of said it, but if people missed it, oblivescence is the process of forgetting.
Mhm.
And you talked to Jane at MedMike about this, but when did you first come across that word? And when did you know you wanted it to be the title of the
Yeah.
book?
I came across it when I actually was composing the poem. So I'm writing it, and as I said, I started to see this is going to be more about just a memory. It's going to be about forgetting, the process of forgetting. And I thought there's got to be a word. There has to be a specific word for that, but I don't know it. So I Googled it and found it that way, and I immediately fell in love with it. I liked it for how rare it is. I mean, I just had never heard of it before, never heard it in conversation or come across it with reading. And I love the sound of it. And so it was like, okay, that's it. And then when I saw that this was going to be a manuscript, I knew that's got to be the title, because in some the poems are about, the process of forgetting. We're sort of seeing it happen. Um, and so that's how it came about.
Yeah, I know I had asked you about coming up with other titles just to see what would come up, but now I'm like, why did I ever think anything else? It does need to be the title. And also, when I first saw it, I was like, that's not a real
Yeah,
word.
yeah,
I was
people say
sure.
that.
I was sure,
Yeah,
which is also
yeah,
funny because my last book of poetry is called Interstitials, and a bunch of people when I showed them the book, they're like, "Wait, what? What is
yeah,
that?"
yeah,
And
yeah.
so I was like, I should know better, but um yeah, great word, great poem, and totally works as the um, title of the book. And for those of you listening, if you haven't seen the video uh, I put
Mm,
to Kelly's reading, you should check that out because
yeah,
that was fun to make. And also, it's about peaches, and I love peaches, so
yeah.
perfect.
You did a
Um,
great job with that. It's a
Thank you.
beautiful movie.
It was
Yeah.
fun. And that's on the YouTube channel. So if you guys go back to the main page, you can see that later. Okay, let's read
Oh,
another poem.
yes. So we're moving to page 37. I'm going to read Hand, Old English of Related to. Um, One of the physical features of my mom that I can still clearly remember is her hands. I loved her hands. From the time I was a child, I remember thinking how beautiful they were. And so I knew at some point that I wanted to write about them. Hand, Old English of Related to. The one says to the other, it is like, one exclaiming they have no hands, and the other asking what hands are, what functions and does, and is so often not thought of, just there, not missing until damaged, until rendered useless, even if only temporarily. The fingers curling in on themselves, the palm less meaty as weeks go by. You could grip with the best of them, digging in when I didn't look both ways before crossing. Could carry the platter out onto the dining room table for its blessing once a year. Tear the weeds from the wet bed, roots and all. We labeled objects around the house, left notes and other notes and more notes. But your hands, You stretched your arms out in front of you, waggled your fingers, said, these.
Such a powerful ending to that poem. I remember reading this one too, and it's just like, ugh, I feel that at the end. That's
Because
heartbreaking
you
and
can, right? You can put notes all over, but
yeah, if you can't, if that word's not coming to mind, it's
yeah,
not coming to mind.
yeah.
Um, it's also this poem also stuck out to me initially because when I was in middle school, I was like obsessed with drawing hands. And I don't know why, but
So hard to
um,
do. Drawing hands
yeah,
is very difficult. Yeah.
yeah, well, maybe that's why I did. I don't know, but it's interesting. It was like maybe a little validating to see like I'm not the only one who hyper focuses on some of these things.
Mhm.
But I wonder if people think about like how important your hands are. You know, that line, not missing until damaged, until rendered useless, like really makes me think, you know, it's cliche, but you don't know what you got till it's gone kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
so definitely another great poem. And also we start with this Old English of related to.
Mm.
So, getting some etymological structure in there. What have you always been fascinated with etymology, or do you think that's something that all like poets and writers ultimately end up looking into?
I think I have. I can't speak for anyone else. But I've always been interested in language. I'm geek enough that if there's a dictionary somewhere, an actual dictionary, I will page through and look for a word that I don't know and really get into the different definitions of words and their etymology. Um, I take it very seriously, obviously, writing, choosing a particular word, what are the connotations that come with it. But I also love playing with words. I think that's what we're doing. We're playing with
Mm-hmm.
words on a screen or a page. Um, one of the first books I can remember is a board book that my mom got me that covered the alphabet. And so there would be a letter, a large letter. It was this thin, narrow book. And there would be the letter and then an animal. And I remember clearly sloth. S was for sloth, and the sloth hanging off the S. And so, sort of these playful illustrations tied with language. And I think, those things, they sort of embed, they're there and they become important to us. So,
Yeah, that's a good point. And maybe this should have been like an audience question. Like everybody listening, talk to us. Are
yeah,
you also obsessed with etymology?
yeah.
I'm not as next level as you, like going through a dictionary anytime I see one in a bookshop or something, but I bought a dictionary specifically for etymology, like
Mhm.
that has been sitting on my floor for I don't know how long because I was like, "Oh, this is going to be great for my writing," but hasn't actually come into use yet, but I know
Yeah.
it will. So it looks like we maybe have a couple writers in the house, and they concur um, about being interested in that kind of wordplay and definitions and whatnot,
Yeah.
origins. Um, yeah, let's go ahead and read another poem.
So the last one from the second section I'm going to read is My Mother as Anticlea Upon Forgetting, which is on page 52. Those of you who have read the collection, I hope, saw that there is sort of a thread of Greek mythology throughout it. It's one of sort of the lower notes. Um, Anticlea was Odysseus's mother, and she supposedly died of grief after he had gone off to fight in the Trojan War and was not returning. And in book 11 of the Odyssey, he travels to the underworld and she's there. And at first, she doesn't recognize him until she drinks from the blood of a sacrificed animal. So, this is something from Greek mythology. Mortals would, if they wanted to interact with the dead and maybe get some answers, would sacrifice an animal. And then the dead would come and drink blood. And so once she did that, she did recognize him and she did talk with him. She did not give him fully all the information he needed. Like she didn't reference the suitors, so he had no idea about them until he got there back to Ithaca. Um, But it's horribly sad because he tries to hug her several times and cannot because she does not have a physical body anymore. So that is what, knowing of that, that is what prompted this particular poem. My mother is Anticlea upon forgetting. I will have traveled all this way only to have you forget my name, to stand on something like a threshold and question who I am and what I have done with your daughter who was sent for milk, never to return. Or late, well into those later years of grieving. Here's the trough to drink from to recall, shallow and bloody, and now, a semblance of recollection, and some of what has been until now unknown or unsaid.
Remember, great poem, of course, and I love when we can work other stories in and kind of like make it part of your own mythology in a way. Um, but let's see, that was okay. Yeah, so I had a question about this, but also we have another semi-related question in the audience that I will ask. But first of all, um, so are these mythological allusions something that are they personally significant to you, or just what you were reading at the time, or something you read a lot in school?
Yeah, I think mostly they came from what I was reading at the time. When I was working on this collection, I was teaching full time at the university level, and one of the texts I taught from was the Odyssey, excerpts from the Odyssey, and so I'm sure that played a role, right? I mean, when you're doing that repeatedly, semester after semester. I had also read around that time Crystal Wolf's novel Medea. And so I came across the phrase climbing down the inner rope, which is a poem I'll be reading in a little bit. And that sparked something. Um, and I think a lot of the terminology and a lot of the words that I came across that ended up, springboarding into poems come from the Latin or the Greek. And so it started to just feel like, okay, this is something that's going on. And I liked the idea of it because at least in my reading of Greek mythology, there's a lot of loss. And uh
Yeah.
and that's something that's occurring here in the collection. So
Hmm.
yeah.
And I'm definitely a sucker for tragedies.
Yeah.
It's funny because my dad always says he only likes the comedies from Shakespeare, and I'm like, well, we
Mm.
are kind of opposite in that. But um, so talking about, kind of you're reading these other books that are reminding you of these stories, and they're filtering into your poems. Um, Linda Dove has a comment slash question here that I will ask you.
Oh.
So she says. Gaps are part and parcel of Alzheimer's, of course, and you use them as a tool, the leaps, the losses, the uncanny lines, the resistance to linear narrative. Can you talk about how you build a poem?
Oh, wow.
I know it's a big question, but see what we
That is
got.
a huge question, Linda. How do I build a poem? Um, okay, most of the time I start with a title. That is not 100%, but it's probably like 98% of the time. Um, and so I begin with the title and I keep in mind that that's my guide. That's the first indication of what the piece is going to be about for the reader. It's going to serve sort of as a thread, hopefully. And so I start with the title, um, and then I just jump in. I you I can't hear you. I've lost audio.
Nope, it's just me double muting
There.
myself and not remembering which thing I need to unclick.
Sorry.
Um, no, no. So and of course I lost my train of thought. You were talking, oh, starting with the title. I think that's not common
Okay.
for
Yeah,
poets to do, so that's interesting.
I think when I was much younger, I would just jump into the first line. But now I really kind of want that title. And sometimes it'll change. I mean, the poem, in my experience, poems are going to sometimes go where they want to go. You have a certain level of control, certainly when you go back in and you revise, but sometimes they end up being something you did not anticipate at all. And then I will always return to the title and ask myself, is it still apt? Does it still
Mm-hmm.
fit? Right? So I move from the title, sort of, you could maybe see it as like a diving board, and I jump in. And I usually have an idea of what that first line's going to be, but then after that, I just kind of get into the groove, and write it, and it finishes itself when it feels done. So, am I
That's really,
answering the
yeah,
question?
I mean, I think so.
It's a
Like I
huge
think
question. Yeah,
I think all of us poets, are not gonna approach poem making the exact same every single time.
yeah,
But I do like your analogy of the diving board, and it is interesting to hear that that's a common process for you is to start
yeah,
there. Um,
yeah.
because I think I have done that, but I don't know that I uh, normally do that. Um,
And
okay.
that might change eventually. That might not work for me anymore. But right now, the last few years at least, that has consistently worked for me.
Mm-hmm. So Lady Dove says thank you. Um, question or comment from Michelle, I think, or Michael, not sure. I think they're quoting some lines from your poem, but it doesn't look like this one. So I'm not sure which one it was. Was there a poem that says, "Is there a reason my sister asks mom back at the farm?"
Mm-mm.
Because, yeah, I wonder what that's a reference to. So maybe they can clarify that for us in a minute. Or maybe it was just something that was reminiscent. Um, but I think so we were gonna go to some more raffles or raffle explanation. Um, okay, so again, I don't know if it's Michelle or Michael, but that's a haiku that you wrote. Is that inspired by what you're listening to? I don't know. Michelle, Michael, please tell us. um, but as far as the raffle, so at the beginning, I see. Okay, so they also have a mother with dementia. Um,
Mm.
so you can go back and look at some of those comments when we're done here. Sorry. Woo, Mike, thank you for clarifying. Okay. Um, you're inspiring people to write haiku right now. All right, so for the raffle, I had said at the beginning for everyone, write pick me if you want to win a signed copy of Oblivescence. I think I'm going to go ahead and draw for that raffle now so that if people don't get it, they can purchase a book and enter the next part of the raffle. So let's see. For the people who said pick me, I see Linda Dove, I see Bo, I see Persia, I see Alex slash Leandra,
Mm.
and the other Linda. So put your names. I got your names already in the thing. I'm going to click the randomizer, see who's going to win the signed
The
copy of,
randomizer.
yes, my, um, look at that. Linda Dove, you are the winner of the signed copy of Oblivescence. So, hooray. Congratulations, Linda Dove. Um, yeah, my uh university has like a book raffle during the readings at the residencies and but it's like hybrid, so we have people on Zoom too. And so for those
Mhm.
people, they would like enter their names in this little what is it called? Wheelofnames.com. You just put a list of names and it puts it on a wheel and you click it and it spins it and then tells you who it is. So fun stuff. So Linda Dove, if you want to email me, or do you have her mailing address, Kelly?
I believe I do. She can email me
Yeah, I was going to say if you guys
or
have already
text.
exchanged emails, that works. You guys can handle it if you would like. Um,
Yes.
Okay, so that is for Oblivescence. All right, so those of you that didn't win, if you want to order a book, then you can do so now, and that will enter you to win a copy of Kelly's other full-length collection, All the Time in the World. So again, if you buy a copy of Oblivescence from Red Sweater Press during the broadcast today, so in the next 20 minutes or so, then you will be entered to win one of those books. And also, the last thing that we're raffling off today is a Red Sweater Press mug, which I meant to have here, but it's in a box over there. So you guys can look at social
It's a
media to see what it
virtual
looks
mug.
like. Yeah, virtual
Yeah.
mug. No, it's real, I promise.
Virtual mug
Um,
or virtual.
so to win the mug or to enter to win the mug in the chat, just tell me what your favorite drink is. And that's how you enter. And we will go from there. So you want to win a mug, type your favorite drink in the chat, and I will also be raffling off another mug to the people who pre-ordered. So I'll go from that list also. So 2 mugs being given away today, and all you gotta do is tell us what your favorite drink is. All right. So let's go ahead and move to the last section of poems.
Sure. All right, so I'm going to be reading the first poem of the third section. It's found on page 57, Image of Tau Tangles in the Brain. This is one of the very few ekphrastic pieces in the collection. It came about after seeing an image of tau tangles in the brain, which are most often found in Alzheimer's patients, found in the neurons. It is the only poem too that slyly references my first collection, All the Time in the World. So I referenced the salt marsh sparrow, which was referenced in my first. Image of tau tangles in the brain. I first see a bobolink nest, not nestled in pasture or meadow, but floating, like your words seem to do, the ends of sentences trailing off as you searched for the right one. I'm at sea here, you'd say, though you never liked being out on it, only close, what we call adjacent. Waterfront property with a path leading right down to. Bobolinks' numbers are declining because of where they lay their eggs, fewer fields, earlier and frequent harvesting. From long and claw and to devour, these birds disappearing like the salt marsh sparrow being drowned in its delicate spotted shell. The patches of oily black in the image aren't ovoidal, are too many to contain life, and they've breached the tangles, found an opening, an inlet, a place or means of entry or escape. And so now there does seem more of the ocean, seaweed moving with the current, clumped later along the shore, just before rotting, turning brown. Pebbles instead of eggs, worn down smooth, glossy against the rough grass that catches.
Another great poem. And I love that you said that that was ekphrastic because either I didn't remember that or I didn't think of that. But I love ekphrastic poetry, and I'm especially interested when people can use things other than like classical paintings because that's commonly done.
Mm, yeah.
But you know, any sort of art piece that you are writing a poem about or in relation to, that counts. And so it's really interesting that like what a cool concept
Mm,
to use this image as inspiration for a poem and not um,
yeah.
be like all the things that you can see in it too. Like that was cool for me to read about. And I had to Google it like as soon as I read this poem. I was like, what do those look like? I want to know what she was seeing.
Yeah.
So, and it reminds me of I did a poem on a Rorschach test ink blot um, one time,
Oh,
and
yeah.
like that's kind of what it
Those are
made me think
great.
of. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Um,
Reminder to people about questions. If you have questions for Kelly, type them in the chat anytime, and we will get to them. Um, and I see more people participating. Okay, good. All right. Did I have something else on that poem? I don't think I did. Go ahead and read the next one.
okay. We're gonna go to page 62. The next poem I'm going to be reading is Climbing Down the Inner Rope 3. And I mentioned this before. So this is one of three poems with the exact same title, numbered 1, 2, 3. This is a phrase that I found in Crystal Wolf's novel Medea, and it references how we have to sort of travel down into our bodies almost to try to recover memories, and almost always these are difficult memories. And so this is the third in the collection, and again gives some backstory. It references my mother's hometown in western Minnesota, but it also touches on how or when I realized that she was unhappy in her first marriage. Climbing down the inner rope 3. We were where there were no hills, only flat fields of corn and soybeans, only steeples drawing the eye up rarely. And there was no father, no check arriving in the mail or note of apology. One wonders about the well water and just how effective the windbreaks were. How far could sound carry? You said you would wait one more week before circling towns on a Warren map. It was a long day before night came to offer an excuse to lie under the eaves and be still.
Thank you for that one, and also introducing me to this idea of climbing down the inner rope. You said this came from Medea, right? The book.
Yeah, Crystal Wolf's
Um,
novel.
yeah, and I had heard good things about that. I haven't read it yet, but
Yeah,
I might have to.
her Cassandra is great. Was a text that I was introduced to as an undergraduate and still have the actual copy of with all my notes
Oh,
from
cool.
class.
Yeah, I hold on to everything like that, and probably to a fault, but um, let me process what we got here. Um, Okay, making sure I trying to type and listen and read and ask questions at the same time is maybe not the best plan. um,
Multitasking. You're multitasking.
yeah, I'm trying. So Linda Harris, who is my dad's cousin, thank you, Linda, for being here. She asks if you've ever considered a memoir on the same subject. So, we have this essay in the middle of your book of poems, but do you think you would ever write a memoir a memoir period? Let's just ask that.
Yeah, sure. Um, I'm not sure I would do this particular subject. The creative nonfiction piece found in here, which was first published by Lindenwood Review, um, was not my first attempt at creative nonfiction in that way, sort of braiding and addressing something major. But I loved doing it. But I feel like that piece is probably um, the most I can do regarding this topic, along with the collection of poems. I kind of feel like that story's been told. Um, but we all have other stories. And yeah, sometimes when I'm not in the mood to write a poem, I will shift over to prose. I've published some short flash fiction pieces, and this nonfiction piece, some others too. And so I like shifting gears and doing that different kind of writing. So sure. I mean, you never know. Yeah.
Yeah, I think nonfiction and poetry seem to go well together. I don't write a lot of nonfiction except like, I don't know, blog posts, I guess, but um I'm always surprised by people who kind of just pick one lane. Like they're like, oh, I only write creative nonfiction or I only write poetry. And to me, like,
Yeah.
um, there can be a lot of overlap. I mean, even with fiction sometimes, I don't
Oh
write a
yeah.
lot of like straight up fictitious poetry, but um it's interesting to me when those things overlap. And I think I also know what you mean, like when you have a collection that kind of tells one story, it's like, okay, this is done and I'm
Hmm.
gonna move on from that. Even though those personal moments will probably come back into play. It's like there is a sense of finishedness to it, I guess, when you
Some
publish
closure.
a collection.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So we had another question from Mike about how many years it took you to write before you wrote the poem. So I guess that's kind of what one of my questions was too, as far as um, if you were writing a lot of these poems like while your mom was going through Alzheimer's, or were most of them written after? Um,
Yeah, I started writing them while we were struggling with it. And I say we because I'm an only child. I was the one on deck. And so writing for me is sometimes about process occurring in my life. Um, and so I began writing them while she was still alive and we were struggling through that. And then after she passed, I continued to write. And so it was a number of years, and it wasn't just with laser focus on that. I was teaching. I would sometimes get distracted and go off and do a series of other poems, and then return to these. And the folder, just keeps getting bigger and bigger on your laptop, and then eventually you're like, okay, this is at least a chapbook, possibly a manuscript. So
mhm.
yeah, it was during and then after. Yeah. So a number of
Okay,
years.
yeah, that makes sense. Um, okay, I think we have one last poem to read,
One last
which
poem. Yep.
is good timing, I think. Okay,
Allostatic load.
take it
Yep.
away.
Which is found on page 71. This is one of the poems that takes a phrase from the scientific or medical world. There are several others that do that as well. So allostatic load refers to extreme physical and emotional mental stress that people endure, um, negative side effects from constant exposure to stress. So allostatic load, that I kept working, standing in front of the class, speaking of just how many years Penelope had to make do to make her way to her room and weep and wail and weave that requisite shroud, is a testament, I think, though no one said so to me. No one ever stopped me in the hall to ask how I really was. I suppose because I kept at it, and well. Didn't let on. Fortitude something I was lectured on by her for years. Her dying and then dead when all the papers needed grading. Apathy and detachment, what they call mind fog, came later. I'd sit and stare off, and when asked, use that old slang, spacing out in space, floating, everyone and everything seemingly far away. It didn't feel like a load, but when I tried meditating and was told to unfurrow my brow, unhinge my jaw, relax the shoulders, I reconsidered. It had been heavy, still was, and what day is it? That question they asked her, along with what animal, the animal sometimes changing from month to month. Stress will kill us, some say. Do what you have to. I walk the one route and another day the other, and try and breathe in deep and exhale through the mouth. What I couldn't do then, all the surfaces slick with ice. I suppose some might have guessed something, that I took the stairs a little slower. Never a big smiler, but certainly not smiling at all then. And not much now, though it'll be a year soon. My ability has been reduced, I read, from constant exposure to stress. And where to? Outside my window, the maple's leaves are turning too soon.
Such another good poem and great way to um, wind down. There's one more poem in the book after that for those of you who haven't seen the manuscript, but um, I have so many thoughts that I'm trying to like make them into questions exactly. But um, this part about her dying and then dead when all the papers needed grading, that if we have any teachers on here, I bet people have experienced that where you're dealing with some grief and still having to like, well, there's kids to teach, papers to grade, stuff to do, and it's such a weird place to be in.
Yeah.
And I know Joan Glass has written about that. Um, and also the idea of like people moving around you throughout their day just as normal and not even knowing like what you're going through. Um, Strange phenomenon, but I'm thinking about this near the end. My ability has been reduced. I read. So this idea that like you can't even maybe understand what's happening to you without
Mm.
seeing it through a different lens, like hearing it from somebody else. Like that's
Yeah.
such a human thing and so hard to I feel like put into words. So, but you did it here. Like such a that's so evocative, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I don't know. Great job. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it was a phrase that I obviously was not familiar with at the time that I was experiencing it.
hmm
And so came upon it and thought, oh, well, that was me at that moment in my life. Um,
Yeah.
and so let's, try to capture that.
So
Yeah.
prior to that moment, did you do a lot of research on Alzheimer's and dementia? Like, is that where some of this jargon comes from, or did it come up organically in conversations with medical staff, or maybe a combination of both?
Yeah. Yeah, I did do quite a bit of research, not only for the collection, but also to try to navigate the world that we were in, and try to better understand what was going on. Um, most often you're unfamiliar with a disease until you have some personal experience with it, and then you go in and you try to learn as much as you can. So yeah, I've got a folder on my laptop, with a bunch of articles and studies. Um, I did also always go with my mom to all of her appointments, and so would be in on a lot of the conversations with the medical staff. There was a team, a neurological team, and I got to know some of the nurses and our social worker quite well. Um, and then I had access to her medical records. And so the shorthand and the language that the medical staff used fascinated me too, and sometimes came into play in the collection. So a combination of things, really. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that would be interesting to see. Um, Sorry, again, bad at multitasking. Those medical notations, like actually seeing the reports and things that people had written.
Yeah.
I think I would be interested in that as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so just check in on our raffle progress here. Remember, okay, so this is I got a few people for the mug raffle. I see you, people who put your drinks, your favorite drinks in the chat. You are entered. Last chance for anybody who hasn't, if you want to put in your favorite drink to be entered for the mug raffle. And if you want to order a copy of Oblivescence right now, you'll be entered to win a copy of All the Time in the World, the previous collection of Kelly's. So let's see, we did that. Also, if you have any questions, any last questions for Kelly, please type them in the chat now. And while we are waiting for people to do that, I will ask a couple last questions, I guess. So Kelly, what do you hope readers will understand from this collection or take away from this book, or what is your hope for this book?
I think a couple of things. I think I hope that it offers one version, because it can only be my version. One version of what it's like to love someone and lose them to this disease. Um, and again, it's my story. Everyone has their own. I also I hope that it can open up a dialogue about Alzheimer's and dementia broadly in a different way than just reading articles in the New York Times or the Washington Post or medical journals, studies and data about it. And so you're going at it in a creative way. And I know I'm not the first one. I mean, Alice Munro has a phenomenal story called The Bear Came Over the Mountain, which focuses on Alzheimer's. But for me, this is what I do, and I hope it sort of can open up a dialogue and give people a different way of looking at it. Yeah.
I think that's a reasonable goal. And it also, I had a thought. Oh, about, do you think that if younger people are talking about the disease and trying to understand it, if that will make older people less concerned about talking about it? Does that question make sense? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. Yeah, because I do think there's we're hesitant to talk about it. I think sometimes people are ashamed to talk about it or they're embarrassed. Um, and I think if we have younger people who become more familiar with it through something like this or reading nonfiction, and it becomes more of part of the dialogue, that can't do anything but help. Um,
Mm-hmm.
help caregivers, especially, feel so alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of that about caregivers feeling kind of unseen, and
Yeah.
talking to this person at a local senior center who was saying that the people who live there have a lot of fear about the disease, and so they don't talk about it. I said, well, how do we fix that?
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
yeah, it is scary, but
It's
not talking
terrifying,
about it
right?
is
Yeah.
not gonna make it
Not gonna.
better.
Yep.
Um, well, thank you for writing this book, and
Thank you for having
taking
me.
this on. I mean, this is a great, I love this book. Everyone should know that. If you don't know that by now, I don't know what you've been watching. But let's go ahead and find those raffle winners and then we will close out here. So, for all the time in the world, I went ahead and added everybody who has ordered the book through Red Sweater Press so far. So, it's a little bigger group than before. I'm gonna, this would be probably more fun if I like spin it with you guys. I wonder, can I share that? Let me see if I can do it. We can all spin the wheel together. Um, I want to share this screen. Okay, YouTubers, can you see the wheel? I'm gonna see if I can.
I can see it.
Oh, and there, I think it's showing on YouTube. Okay, here we go. Spinning the wheel. Oh my goodness. Wow, okay. That was unexpected. Okay, well, Katie D is not here at the moment, I don't think, but I will convene with her
Okay.
afterwards. So, congratulations, Katie. We will get you that copy of All the Time in the World. And now we have to go to the mug one. Let me see if I saved those correctly. This is, ah, yes, there's two. Okay, so for the people who are here who entered their favorite drink, let's find out.
Each.
That one's a little clearer. Yes, Linda Harris, that is, you get the mug. And um, mug number 2 is from pre-orders. Okay, so All the Time in the World's going to Katie. One mug is going to Linda H. And this one is the one I want, which is similar to the other one. Okay, last one. Oh man, these keep going right to the edge. All right, Anthony K is somebody who ordered, so I have their address and I can convene with them later. Okay, so that's the mugs, and the books are all raffled off. Let me make sure we don't have any final questions, comments, whatever. Okay, so I know who to coordinate with for the raffle. For those of you who ordered the book, thank you. And whether you ordered it from us or not, you can get it on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and Target and a bunch of other places. So if
Tons of
you're
independent bookstores too. Yeah.
right, yeah. So not on Bookshop at the moment. We're hopefully going to work that out soon. I emailed them. But yeah, if you want to get it from your local bookstore and they don't have it, then ask them if they want to get it and get it for you. And that would be great. And if you want to review it on Goodreads or Amazon, please do so. If you place a review in a literary magazine or something, definitely let us know so we can share that and say thank you. So thank you all for coming tonight and participating in the chat and the raffle and all that. And
Thank you,
yeah,
everyone. Thank you, Caitlin.
thank you for writing this book. All right, we're going to end the YouTube stream. So good night to the YouTubers. And